All right, here's question 5 from the GRE practice test. The idea in this problem is we have these two numbers, x and y, and what we know about x and y is they're both between 0 and 1, and y is bigger than x. And the two quantities that we're supposed to compare are 1 minus y and y minus x. Lots of ways you can figure out this problem. I think the one that works best for me is to recognize that the way you find the distance between two numbers is to subtract them. So for example, if I asked you how far is it from 8 to 10, you'd probably just immediately know that the distance is 2. But really, the math that you'd be doing, maybe in your head, maybe subconsciously, is that 10 minus 8 equals 2. I guess technically you have to make sure that you subtract the smaller number from the larger number. You wouldn't want to do 8 minus 10, and then you'd get negative 2 as your answer because distance is always assumed to be positive. But as long as we're subtracting the smaller number from the larger number, then all subtraction means is the distance between two numbers. With that in mind, we can compare these two quantities pretty easily. Maybe I'll make a number line for the visual learner out there. So here's 0, here's 1, and we know that x and y are somewhere in between 0 and 1. Since x is less than y, maybe I throw x over on this side and y over on this side. Quantity A, 1 minus y, is just the distance between 1 and y. Quantity B, y minus x, is just the distance between y and x. So the question is, which of these two are bigger, or are they the same, or can we not tell? Well, with this interpretation of the quantities, I think it's fairly easy to conclude that we can't tell which one is bigger. If you want the blue distance to be bigger than the red distance, just scoot x over here so it's really, really close to y. If you want the red distance to be bigger than the blue distance, then just scoot y over here so it's really close to 1. If you want them to be the same, then just space them out equally. Because we have control over x and y, we have control over the distances between x and y and 1. So we have control over the values of these quantities. The relationship cannot be determined from the information given. D is the correct answer. If you've been watching these videos in order, maybe you remember back on question 3, where I finished the problem and then I set the two quantities equal to each other and messed around with some algebra to kind of analyze the problem a little bit further. Not really anything you need to do for the exam, but maybe it's enlightening and maybe it's worth a minute or two of your time. Well, we could do that exact same thing here for question 5. Look what happens when I take quantity A, which is 1 minus y, and set it equal to quantity B, which is y minus x. Well, let's see, I got a y on both sides of the equation, so maybe I'd add y to both sides to get all the y's together, and I'd get 1 equals 2y minus x. That's not all that enlightening. Maybe for some reason I'd add x to both sides and get 1 plus x equals 2y. Again, this doesn't really tell me much, but note that if I divide both sides of the equation by 2 to solve for y, I'd get y equals 1 plus x over 2. This expression, 1 plus x over 2, has a mathematical meaning. In fact, it's almost the same as what we did over here. Maybe you recall that over here, when we added up x and z and divided by 2, we got the average of x and z. And when we added up x plus y plus z and divided by 3, we got the average of x, y, and z. And more generally, anytime we add up a bunch of numbers and divide by how many numbers there are, we get the average value in that set. Well, down here, all I'm doing is adding up two numbers, 1 and x, and dividing by 2. What I'm saying is, the right side of this equation is just the average of 1 and x. What this statement is saying is that these two quantities are going to be the same only if y is equal to the average of 1 and x. In other words, y is halfway in between 1 and x. Oh yeah, that makes sense. If y is the average of 1 and x, then y is halfway in between 1 and x, so the distance from y to 1 is the exact same as the distance from y to x. The two quantities would be the same. I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.